when a mother and her young son abruptly left the motel in a strange hurry, with the boy barely dressed. Something about their behavior felt terribly wrong to the maid. Trusting her instincts, she decided to check their room, and what she found hidden beneath the sheets made her blood run cold. In that moment, her worst suspicions were confirmed, and she had to act fast. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The first hints of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky in muted shades of pink and gold as Lena Morales made her way down the worn corridor of the Starlight Motel. At 38 years old, Lena had spent more mornings than she cared to count in this place, her hands wrapped around the handle of a mop, her eyes taking in the faded wallpaper and scuffed linoleum floors that had become as familiar to her as the lines on her own palms. The Starlight Motel stood as a tired sentinel on the outskirts of Orange Mound, Tennessee. Its L-shaped two-story structure had seen better days, the once bright neon sign now flickering weakly in the pre-dawn gloom. Outside, a small playground sat in silent testimony to happier times, its swings and slide now rusted and forgotten, untouched by the laughter of children for years. Lena's movements were practiced, almost meditative, as she guided the mop across the floor. The quiet of the early morning was broken only by the soft swish of the mop and the occasional creak of the old building settling. As she neared the end of the corridor, a flicker of movement caught her eye through the smudged window. Pausing her work, Lena leaned the mop against the wall and moved closer to the glass. In the dim parking lot, she saw an old sedan pull in, its headlights cutting through the morning mist. As the engine cut off, two figures emerged, a woman and a young boy. The woman looked haggard, her movements jerky and uncertain as she retrieved a suitcase from the back seat. The boy, dressed in pajamas that seemed a size too small, clung to his mother's hand, his eyes heavy with sleep. Lena watched as he yawned widely, his free hand rubbing at his eyes in a gesture that tugged at her heart. Realizing they would need to check in, Lena abandoned her mop and made her way to the front desk. The ancient clock on the wall read 6:30 a.m., far too early for the regular receptionist to have arrived. It wasn't an unusual situation for Lena, though. Over the years, she had become accustomed to handling these early morning check-ins, a jack-of-all-trades in this small, run-down establishment. As the woman and child entered the lobby, the harsh fluorescent lights cast deep shadows under their eyes, accentuating their exhaustion. Lena put on her best professional smile, though it felt strained even to her. "Good morning," she greeted them softly, mindful of the sleepy child. "How can I help you today?" The woman approached the desk, her eyes darting nervously around the shabby lobby. "We need a room," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just for the night." Lena nodded, her fingers moving efficiently over the ancient computer keyboard. "Of course, that'll be $30 for the night with a $20 deposit." She watched as the woman fumbled in her purse, eventually producing a crumpled handful of bills. As Lena counted out the money and prepared the room key, she couldn't help but notice the boy's drooping eyelids and the way he swayed slightly on his feet. The woman, too, looked like she was running on fumes, dark circles prominent under her eyes. "You'll be in room 12, Lena said, handing over the key. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your room." The trio made their way down the corridor in silence, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Lena could feel the weariness radiating from both mother and child, and she kept her explanation of the room's features brief as she ushered them inside. "The phone is here if you need to reach the front desk. Just dial 0, she explained, gesturing to the ancient rotary phone on the nightstand. "Hot water is limited, so you might want to keep showers short. Checkout time is 11 a.m. tomorrow." The woman nodded absently, already moving to place the suitcase on the bed. Lena winced internally as she saw the luggage wheels leave a dark streak on the worn bedspread, but said nothing. The boy had already climbed onto the bed with his shoes on, his head sinking into the pillow. "If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask," Lena said, but the woman seemed barely to register her words. Taking this as her cue to leave, Lena quietly exited the room, closing the door behind her. As she made her way back to the reception area, Lena's mind wandered. She wondered about the story behind this small family. What had brought them to the Starlight Motel at such an early hour? But such speculation was a dangerous game in a place like this, where many guests carried secrets they'd rather keep hidden. Reaching for her mop, Lena was about to resume her cleaning when a sudden realization hit her. In the rush to get the guests settled, she had forgotten to provide them with the TV remote and Wi-Fi information, both stored at the front desk, with the remote kept there specifically to prevent theft. Sighing at her own forgetfulness, Lena retrieved the items from the locked cabinet behind the desk. She made her way back to room 12, hoping she wouldn't be disturbing the exhausted pair too much. Knocking softly on the door, Lena waited. No response came. She knocked again, a little louder this time, and called out, "Housekeeping. I have some items for you." After a moment, the door opened a crack, and the woman's face appeared, her expression a mix of irritation and fatigue. "What?" she snapped. Taken aback by the harsh tone, Lena nevertheless maintained her professional demeanor. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said, "but I forgot to give you the TV remote and Wi-Fi information earlier." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she reached out and snatched the items from Lena's hand. "Next time, leave them outside. Don't disturb us again," she growled, and with that, she slammed the door in Lena's face. Stunned by the sudden hostility, Lena stood frozen for a moment. She had encountered her fair share of rude guests over the years, but something about this interaction left her deeply unsettled. Shaking her head, Lena made her way back to her abandoned mop. However, as she resumed her cleaning duties, the encounter played over and over in her mind. The woman's agitation, the boy's exhaustion, the late-night arrival, all of it added up to a picture that didn't sit well with Lena. But what could she do? In a place like the Starlight Motel, in a neighborhood like Orange Mound, unusual circumstances were more the rule than the exception. The clock on the wall now showed 6:45 a.m. As the morning began to color the sky, Lena tried to push her concerns aside. She had rooms to clean and a long day ahead of her. But even as she focused on her tasks, a small part of her remained alert, listening for any sounds of distress from room 12. As she worked her way around to the other side of the L-shaped building, Lena's eyes drifted to the small playground outside. The rusted equipment stood as a sad reminder of happier times, when families would stay at the Starlight for summer vacations or weekend getaways. Now it was mostly a haven for those down on their luck or looking for a place to hide. The swings swayed gently in the morning breeze, chains creaking softly as if mourning their own neglect. Lena made a mental note to mention the playground to the boy when she saw him next. Despite its dilapidated state, children often found joy in the simple act of swinging or sliding. It might bring a smile to his sleepy face. The quiet of the early morning was suddenly shattered by the sound of a door opening. Lena turned, startled, to see the woman and child from room 12 hurrying down the corridor towards the exit. The contrast from their arrival was stark and jarring. The woman looked even more haggard than before, her movements jerky and agitated, eyes darting nervously as if expecting pursuit. But it was the boy that truly caught Lena's attention, his transformation sending a chill down her spine. Gone were his pajamas, replaced by nothing more than a thin tank top and a diaper. His bare legs poked out beneath the oversized shirt, and his feet were completely bare against the rough carpet. The woman clutched the suitcase in one hand, practically dragging the child with the other. Alarm bells rang in Lena's head as she abandoned her mop and rushed to intercept them at the front desk. Her heart pounded as she struggled to keep her voice calm and professional. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" she asked, trying to catch the woman's eye. "Are you checking out already? I can process your refund if there's a problem with the room." The woman barely spared Lena a glance, her eyes wild and unfocused. She muttered a terse, "We're not leaving," as she pushed past, her grip on the boy's arm visibly tightening. Lena watched helplessly as they climbed into the sedan, the woman roughly depositing the boy in the back seat before tossing the suitcase in the trunk. As the car peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing on the worn asphalt, Lena stood frozen, a knot of unease growing in her stomach. The whole scene felt wrong, deeply and fundamentally wrong. The image of the boy in his inadequate clothing, the fear in his sleepy eyes, the mother's erratic behavior, it all pointed to something sinister. Lena had always longed for a child of her own, but life in Orange Mound hadn't presented her with many suitable partners. Seeing a child potentially in distress struck a chord deep within her, awakening a protective instinct she hadn't realized she possessed. Glancing at the clock, Lena saw it was now past 7:20 a.m. The day shift receptionist would be arriving soon, and she still had rooms to prepare. With a heavy sigh, she pushed her concerns aside and focused on her tasks. She moved from room to room, opening windows to air out the musty spaces. The questions multiplied in her mind as she worked. Why had the boy been dressed so inappropriately? Surely the woman had packed clothes for him. She'd brought a whole suitcase after all. Had he wet himself? Was that why they'd left in such a hurry? But if so, why not simply ask for fresh linens? The more Lena thought about it, the more convinced she became that she needed to investigate. Using her housekeeping key, she cautiously approached room 12. Her heart pounded in her chest as she unlocked the door, pushing her cleaning cart ahead of her as a flimsy excuse for her intrusion. The moment she crossed the threshold, a peculiar odor assaulted her senses. It wasn't the acrid smell of urine she had half expected, but something sharper, almost chemical. It reminded her of burned plastic, though she couldn't quite place it. The scent hung heavy in the air, mingling with the stale odor of cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener. Lena's unease grew as she surveyed the room. The bed was a tangled mess of sheets, pillows strewn haphazardly as if thrown aside in haste. Water droplets speckled the bathroom floor, a damp towel crumpled in the corner. As she began to straighten the bedding, something caught her eye. Tucked beneath the rumpled sheets were several items that made her blood run cold. A bent spoon, blackened on the bottom, a handful of syringes, and 2 passports. Her heart sank as the pieces began to fall into place. Lena was no stranger to the signs of drug use. She'd seen it all too often in her years at the Starlight. But the presence of a child in this situation filled her with a mix of sorrow and anger. What kind of mother would expose her son to such danger? As she stood there, frozen in indecision, movement outside the window caught her attention. The old sedan had returned, pulling into the parking lot with a screech of tires. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she saw not just the woman and child emerge, but a man as well. His face was set in a hard scowl that matched the woman's agitated demeanor, his eyes darting suspiciously around the parking lot. Lena's mind raced. Was this the boy's father? If so, why hadn't he been with them earlier? And if not, who was he? The questions multiplied, each more unsettling than the last. She watched as the trio made their way towards the motel entrance, the boy sandwiched between the adults, his small shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself invisible. With trembling hands, Lena quickly finished straightening the room, careful not to disturb the damning evidence she'd discovered. She needed time to think, to decide what, if anything, she should do with this information. As she wheeled her cart out of the room, Lena's gaze lingered on the small boy trailing behind the adults. In that moment, she made a silent vow to keep a close eye on room 12, no matter what it might cost her. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky as Lena made her way back to the front desk, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The clock on the wall read 8 a.m., and right on cue, the day shift receptionist Barry McKay pedaled into view on his ancient bicycle. Barry, a lanky man in his mid-50s with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, had been working at the Starlight almost as long as Lena. He nodded a greeting as he stowed his bike helmet in the small storage closet behind the desk and logging into the computer. "Morning, Lena," he said, stifling a yawn. "Anything exciting happen on the night shift?" Lena hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Barry," she began cautiously, "did you see that old sedan in the parking lot, with the woman and the little boy?" Barry's brow furrowed as he recalled. "Yeah, I saw them. Kinda hard to miss. That kid was barely dressed. What's going on?" Lena quickly filled Barry in on the strange comings and goings of the guests in room 12, including the arrival of the unknown man. As she spoke, her concern grew. "Barry, I'm worried. Something doesn't feel right about this situation. Do you think we should call the police or maybe Child Protective Services?" Barry let out a long sigh, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Lena, honey, this is Orange Mound. You know as well as I do that the cops around here have bigger fish to fry, and CPS, they're so overworked, they barely bat an eye unless there's blood on the floor." Lena's shoulders sagged, knowing Barry was right. Orange Mound's history of poverty and crime meant that law enforcement often turned a blind eye to all but the most egregious offenses. A child in a tank top and diaper, while concerning, was hardly cause for alarm in a neighborhood where far worse occurred daily. "Besides," Barry continued, "the kid's with his parents, right? Or at least his mom. CPS isn't going to do much without clear evidence of abuse or neglect. We'd just be upsetting paying customers for nothing." Lena nodded reluctantly, Barry's pragmatic words dousing the fire of her concern. She had lived in Orange Mound long enough to know that good intentions often led nowhere in this part of town. Still, the image of the boy's fearful eyes haunted her. As if summoned by their conversation, the door to the motel office swung open. The woman from room 12 entered, followed closely by the man and the little boy. Lena and Barry exchanged a quick glance before plastering on their best customer service smiles. "Good morning," Lena called out, her voice overly cheerful. "I hope you found everything to your satisfaction." The woman barely grunted in response, her gaze fixed straight ahead as she marched towards their room. The man's cold eyes swept over Lena and Barry, a clear warning in their steely depths. But it was the boy who truly captured Lena's attention. Gone was the sleepy child from earlier that morning. In his place was a quiet, wary little figure who seemed to shrink into himself with each step. His eyes darted nervously between the adults, and Lena could have sworn she saw a flicker of fear cross his face as the man's hand came to rest heavily on his shoulder. As the trio vanished down the hallway, Lena turned to Barry, her earlier resolve wavering. "Maybe you're right," she murmured. "Maybe it's not our business. I guess the night shift just got to me." Barry nodded sympathetically. "Look, Lena, I know you mean well, but we can't save everyone who comes through those doors. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is just mind our own business and let folks sort out their own problems." With a heavy heart, Lena nodded. "I suppose you're right. I'll go finish up the room checks and close the windows. It should be aired out enough by now." As she turned away, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she should have done something more. But Barry was entirely wrong. In a place like Orange Mound, sometimes turning a blind eye was the only way to survive. With Barry's words still ringing in her ears, Lena was about to enter one of the empty rooms when a commotion from the corridor caught her attention. She scanned around and peering towards the source of the disturbance. The family from room 12 stood just outside their door, but the boy was struggling against his mother's grip, refusing to enter the room. His small face was contorted with fear and determination as he tried to wrench his hand free. Lena's heart clenched at the sight. She took an involuntary step forward, but Barry's hand suddenly on her shoulder and held her back. He must have heard the commotion from the reception area too. They watched, torn between the instinct to intervene and the ingrained habit of minding their own business. Before they could decide, the man's gaze snapped towards them. His eyes were cold and threatening, boring into Lena with an intensity that made her shiver. He leaned in close to the woman, whispering something in her ear. She too turned to look at Lena and Barry, her expression a mixture of anger and wariness. Feeling caught, Lena and Barry approached the family, trying to appear casual. "Is everything all right here?" Barry asked, his voice carefully neutral. The mother's response was immediate and harsh. "Don't you have anything better to do than watch other people's business?" she snapped. "Nothing's happening. The kid just doesn't want to listen to his parents." The man who accompanied them, whom Lena assumed was the boy's father, spoke up in a composed and calm voice. "We'll leave him outside for a while. He'll come around. I think he just needs some playtime after the long journey." Lena, sensing an opportunity, quickly offered, "That's no problem at all. We have a small playground. I'd be happy to keep an eye on him for a while." The mother seemed to consider this for a moment before turning to the son. You can stay outside, but you listen to this lady and be good. Understand? The boy nodded silently, his eyes wide and wary. The mother and man disappeared into the room, the door closing with a final sounding click. Lena crouched down to the boy's level, her voice gentle. Would you like to see the playground? We have a swing. The boy remained quiet, shaking his head slightly. Lena, undeterred, continued softly. That's okay. We could just sit for a while if you'd like. The swing is nice and quiet. After a moment's hesitation, the boy nodded, following Lena to the old playground. The rusted equipment creaked in the morning breeze as the boy settled onto the swing, his small hands gripping the chains tightly. Lena kept a watchful eye on him, her heart aching at the sadness etched on his young face. Slowly, carefully, she began to draw him out. My name's Lena, she said softly. What's yours? Noah, came the quiet reply. And how old are you, Noah? Noah held up 5 fingers, his eyes meeting Lena's briefly before darting away. Lena hesitated before asking her next question, not wanting to push too hard. Noah, can you tell me why you didn't want to go into the room? The boy's shoulders tensed, and Lena quickly added, It's okay if you don't want to talk about it. You don't have to explain anything to me. After a long moment, Noah whispered, It smells bad in there. I don't like it here. Lena's mind flashed back to the sharp chemical odor she'd noticed earlier, and to the paraphernalia she'd found on the bed. Her heart broke for this little boy, trapped in a situation he couldn't possibly understand. I'm sorry it smells bad, she said gently. But don't worry, it seems like you and your mum are just staying for one night. Maybe tomorrow you'll go somewhere nicer. Noah nodded, pushing himself slightly on the swing. Then, almost as an afterthought, he asked, Do you have any food? I'm really hungry. The question caught Lena off guard. It was still early morning, and the thought of this child going hungry twisted something inside her. Of course, she said, making a quick decision. Wait here just a moment, I'll get you something from the canteen. She pointed out the small food service area, just a stone's throw from the playground. I'll be right back, okay? You can see me the whole time. As Lena hurried to the food service counter, she kept glancing back at Noah, who sat quietly on the swing, his feet barely touching the ground. At the counter, she ordered a grilled cheese sandwich, the most substantial item on the meager breakfast menu. While the canteen lady was registering the order, Lena saw Noah's mother emerge from the room and approach the playground. Torn between her promise to Noah and her instinct to avoid conflict, Lena hesitated. The canteen workers noticed her looking at the boy and the mother. Her voice snapped her back to attention. You still want to put your order? Lena considered, then nodded, deciding she could bring it to their room later if needed. By the time she returned to the playground, Noah's mother was trying to coax him back to the room. I'm sorry, Lena said, approaching cautiously. I didn't mean to leave him alone. He said he was hungry, so I ordered something from the kitchen. The mother's response was curt and dismissive. No need for that. Turning to Noah, she said firmly, Let's go back to the room. Playtime's over. Noah's shoulders slumped as he slid off the swing. Lena's heart ached at the defeated look on his face. I can bring the sandwich to your room when it's ready, she offered. Don't bother us, the mother snapped. We don't need anything. Lena persisted gently. I could just leave it outside your door. No disturbance. The woman grunted non-committally as she led Noah away. Lena watched them disappear into room 12, a sense of unease settling over her. With a sigh, she turned her attention back to her duties. The other rooms needed to be closed up after airing out. As she moved from door to door, closing windows and locking up, her mind kept drifting back to Noah and the troubling situation in room 12. When she finished her rounds, Lena retrieved the sandwich from the canteen and made her way to room 12. As she neared the door, muffled voices reached her ears, Noah's high-pitched whine mixed with the hushed tones of the adults. They were whispering about money. Not enough. I need more. That's it then. as if trying to persuade the boy of something. Lena hesitated outside the door, her hand poised to knock. The memory of the utensil she'd found earlier warred with Barry's pragmatic advice. How many times had she turned a blind eye to similar situations, telling herself it wasn't her place to interfere? But the presence of a child changed everything. Still, she knew that if she started calling the police for every suspicious occurrence, she'd likely lose her job. The Starlight's owner wouldn't appreciate her scaring away paying customers, no matter how unsavory they might be. With a heavy heart, Lena knocked softly on the door. The voices inside fell silent. "I've left the sandwich out here on the table," she called, trying to keep her voice neutral. After leaving the sandwich outside room 12 and notifying its occupants, Lena turned away with a heavy heart. She knew she needed to resume her cleaning duties, so she headed towards the janitor's closet to prepare her cleaning cart. As she stood outside the closet, organizing her supplies, Lena couldn't help but keep glancing back at room 12. She wondered if they would take the sandwich she'd left, hoping that at least Noah would get something to eat. Suddenly, the door to room 12 swung open. Lena's heart skipped a beat as she saw the man emerge, his hand firmly gripping Noah's arm. The mother was nowhere in sight. To Lena's dismay, they completely ignored the sandwich on the table, instead heading straight for the exit. Lena's heart began to race. She abandoned her cleaning cart and began to follow them, trying to maintain a discreet distance and appear casual as she watched the scene unfold. From her vantage point, she could clearly see the unfolding scene. Noah was clearly resisting, his small body twisting as he tried to break free from the man's iron grip. Lena's heart raced as she watched them head towards the parking lot. Without conscious thought, she found herself following, keeping to the shadows of the motel's covered walkway. As they reached the car, Noah's resistance intensified. "No, I don't want to go. Mommy, I want Mommy." The man, clearly losing patience, roughly lifted the boy and shoved him into the back seat. Noah's cries, which had been muffled whimpers until now, suddenly erupted into full-blown wails. "Daddy, Daddy, I want Daddy!" In that moment, any lingering doubts Lena had harbored evaporated. This man was not the boy's father. Whatever was happening here, it was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. The man's response to the boy was too low for Lena to hear, but his actions spoke volumes. With a swift motion, he slammed the door shut, quickly rounding the vehicle to climb into the driver's seat. Abandoning all pretense of caution, Lena sprinted across the parking lot. She reached the car just as the car's engine roared to life. Her feet were moving before her mind had fully processed what she was about to do. Heart pounding, palms sweating, she raced towards the sedan, determined to stop whatever was about to happen, no matter the cost. "Stop! Wait!" The man's face contorted with anger as he reluctantly rolled down the window. "What the hell do you want?" he snarled. Lena struggled to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry, but is everything all right? Are you checking out? Where's the boy's mother?" "Mind your own damn business," the man snapped, his hand moving to roll the window back up. Lena reacted instinctively, wedging her fingers into the gap. "Please," she said, her eyes darting to the terrified child in the back seat. "I just want to make sure everything's okay. Can I talk to the boy for a moment?" The man's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You're out of your mind, lady. Get your hand out of my car before I break your fingers." But Lena stood her ground, her gaze locked on the child. "Sweetie," she called softly, "is this your daddy? Do you want to go with him?" The boy's response was immediate and heart-wrenching. "No!" he wailed, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "I want my real daddy. I want to go home." The man cursed, panic flashing in his eyes. He jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life. Lena barely had time to snatch her hand away before the car lurched backward, tires squealing on the asphalt. As the sedan peeled out of the parking lot, Lena caught a glimpse of movement in the back seat. The rear door began to open just so slightly, the child clearly struggling with the handle. The car stopped abruptly before it could merge onto the road, the man inside visibly grappling with the escaping boy. Without thinking, Lena broke into a run, her voice rising in a desperate shout. "Help! Somebody help! He's taking the boy!" Lena's voice rose in a desperate shout, echoing across the nearly empty parking lot. From the corner of her eye, she saw Barry burst out of the motel office, drawn by her cries. Lena's lungs burned as she closed the distance, her entire focus on reaching that open door. She could hear Barry's footsteps pounding behind her, feel the rough asphalt beneath her worn shoes. In that moment, nothing else mattered but saving that little boy from whatever fate awaited him. As she closed in on the vehicle, Lena's mind raced with the possible outcomes of her actions. She had no plan, no weapon, nothing but her own determination and the desperate hope that she wasn't too late. The boy's frightened face, visible through the car window, spurred her on. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not her job, not her safety, not the potential consequences of her interference. Lena reached for the car door handle, her heart pounding in her chest. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Lena's hand closed around the car door handle. The metal was hot under her palm, warmed by the morning sun that now beat down mercilessly on the Starlight Motel's cracked parking lot. Her breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning from her sprint across the gravel. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, Lena wrenched the door open. The terrified face of the little boy greeted her, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Without hesitation, Lena reached in, her arms encircling the child's small frame. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're safe now. I've got you." The boy didn't hesitate. He practically launched himself into Lena's arms, his small body shaking with sobs. The acrid smell of fear and unwashed skin filled Lena's nostrils as she held him close, backing away from the car as quickly as she could. From the driver's seat came a string of vicious curses. The man's face was a mask of fury as he realized his plan had been foiled. For a heart-stopping moment, Lena feared he might try to reclaim the boy by force, but then his eyes darted to Barry, who had finally caught up and was already pulling out his cell phone. With a final snarl of frustration, the man slammed the car into gear and peeled away, tires screeching on the asphalt. As he sped off, Lena's mind snapped into focus long enough to memorize the license plate, TN783XYZ. The string of letters and numbers burned themselves into her memory, a vital piece of information she knew could be crucial in the moments to come. "It's all right now," Lena murmured, stroking the boy's hair as he clung to her. His tears soaked through her uniform shirt, but she hardly noticed. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." Barry jogged up, his face flushed from the unexpected exertion. The usual easygoing expression he wore was replaced by one of shock and confusion. "What the hell just happened?" he panted, eyes wide with disbelief. Lena quickly filled him in on what she'd witnessed, her words tumbling out in a rush. With each revelation, Barry's face grew more grave. "We need to call the police," Lena insisted, her arms tightening protectively around the boy. "That man was trying to kidnap this child. The mother might still be in danger." Barry hesitated, his ingrained skepticism warring with the evidence before his eyes. "Shouldn't we check on the mother first? Make sure this isn't some kind of misunderstanding." But Lena shook her head firmly. "Every second counts, Barry. We should have made those calls earlier. That man could be long gone if we wait. Please call 911 now, or I'll call." Recognizing the steel in Lena's voice, Barry nodded and dialed. As he spoke to the dispatcher, Lena turned her attention back to the trembling child in her arms. She gently tilted his tear-stained face up to meet her gaze. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "Does anything hurt?" The boy hiccuped, his lower lip trembling as he answered. No, he whispered. "That's a good sign, Noah," Lena smiled, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "Can you tell me who that man was?" "The one in the car." Noah's face crumpled, fresh tears welling in his eyes. He said he was my new daddy, but I don't want a new daddy. I want my real daddy." Lena's heart clenched at the raw fear and confusion in the child's voice. "It's okay, Noah. You did the right thing. We're going to find your real daddy, I promise." As she spoke, the wail of approaching sirens filled the air. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Help was on the way. Whatever was going on here, they would get to the bottom of it. Barry ended his call and turned to Lena, his face grave. "The police are on their way. They want us to stay put and keep the boy with us until they arrive." Lena nodded, adjusting Noah to a more comfortable position on her hip. What about his mother? She might still be in the room, maybe tied up or hurt by the kidnapper. "I'll go check," Barry offered, already moving towards the motel. "You stay here with the kid, keep him calm." As Barry hurried off, Lena focused on soothing Noah. She hummed softly, rocking him gently as she had seen countless mothers do. Despite the warmth of the morning sun, she could feel the child shivering against her. "It's going to be all right," she murmured, as much to herself as to Noah. "The police will be here soon and we'll sort everything out." Noah's sobs had quieted to occasional sniffles, but his grip on Lena remained fierce. She found herself wondering about this child's life, about the circumstances that had led to this terrifying moment. What kind of mother would allow her son to be taken by a stranger? And where was Noah's real father in all of this? The sound of the front door opening reverberated through the parking lot, followed by Barry's urgent shout. "Lena, room 12's door is locked, and no one responded when I called. I think the mother might be in danger inside." Lena's blood ran cold. What had seemed like a straightforward kidnapping attempt was rapidly evolving into something far more complex and sinister. As the first police cruiser pulled into the lot, lights flashing, Lena steeled herself for what promised to be a long and difficult day. The Starlight Motel's parking lot transformed into a hive of activity as police officers swarmed the scene. Officers poured out of their vehicles, their faces set with grim determination. The sound of radio chatter crackled through the air, punctuated by the occasional bark of orders from the officers securing the scene. It was a surreal tableau, the dilapidated motel backdrop to a scene that seemed pulled from a crime drama. Lena watched, her heart pounding, as they approached room 12. The lead officer, a tall, broad-shouldered man, knocked firmly on the door. "Police, open up!" His voice echoed through the quiet motel corridor. No response came from within. After several more attempts, the officer nodded to his colleagues. In a swift, coordinated movement, they forced the door open, the sound of splintering wood filling the air. Lena held her breath as the officers entered the room. Moments later, one emerged, gesturing for the paramedics. "We need medical assistance in here," he called out. As the paramedics rushed in with their equipment, Lena edged closer, Noah still clinging to her. She could see into the room now, and the sight made her heart sink. The woman lay unconscious on the bed, her arm dangling limply over the side. Beside her, stark against the dingy bedspread, lay a bent spoon and several syringes, the same one she saw earlier this morning. On the rickety table near the window, Lena could see a stack of cash, far more than most Starlight Motel guests ever carried. One of the officers approached Lena, his face grave. "Ma'am, we suspect the man might have drugged the woman and attempted to kidnap the child. Do you know anything about this?" Lena shook her head, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "No, officer, but when I cleaned the room earlier, I saw paraphernalia already there. I don't think the man drugged her. I think she did this to herself." The officer's eyebrows rose and he jotted something in his notebook. He then crouched down to Noah's eye level, his voice softening. "Hey there, buddy. Can you tell me if your mom sometimes acts funny? Like she's sleepy or confused when she shouldn't be?" Noah nodded slowly, his small fingers tightening their grip on Lena's shirt. "Sometimes Mommy sleeps a lot," he whispered, "and sometimes she gets really angry for no reason. It's scary." Lena felt a wave of sorrow wash over her. How long had this little boy been living in fear, watching his mother spiral into addiction? As the paramedics arrived and worked to revive the woman inside the room, attaching an IV and monitoring her vital signs, another officer turned to Lena just outside of room 12, his face a mask of professional concern. Ma'am, I'm Officer Daniels. Can you tell me what happened here? Lena took a deep breath, steadying herself. She recounted the morning's events, from the strange arrival of Noah and his mother to the attempted abduction. As she spoke, she felt Noah's grip on her tighten, his small body tensing at the recollection. "And the license plate," Officer Daniels prompted, his pen poised over a notepad. "TN783XYZ, Lena replied without hesitation. The string of letters and numbers had burned themselves into her memory. The officer nodded, keying the information into his radio. "Dispatch, I need an APB out on a vehicle with license plate TN783XYZ. Suspect is wanted in connection with an attempted kidnapping." As they waited for a response, Lena gently rubbed Noah's back, murmuring soothing words. The boy's sobs had quieted to occasional hiccups, but he showed no signs of letting go of her. "Can you tell me your full name, son, and your mother's name?" Officer Daniels asked, crouching down to Noah's eye level. Noah lifted his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Noah Holloway. My mother is Krista Holloway." The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "Noah Holloway," he repeated, keying the name into his radio. "Dispatch, can you run a check on that name?" Possible missing persons case. As they waited for a response, Lena's mind raced. Missing persons. Just how long had Noah been away from his real father? The radio crackled to life. "Officer Daniels, we have a hit. Noah Holloway, age 5, reported missing 2 days ago by his father, Michael Holloway. Address is listed as 1247 Maple Street, less than 10 miles from your current location." A wave of relief washed over Lena. "Did you hear that, Noah?" she said softly. "They're going to contact your daddy. He's been looking for you." For the first time since the ordeal began, a glimmer of hope appeared in Noah's eyes. "Really? Daddy's coming." Before Lena could respond, a commotion from inside room 12 caught their attention. The team of paramedics emerged, carefully guiding a stretcher. On it lay Noah's mother, Krista, her eyes dazed and her movements sluggish. An IV bag hung from a pole attached to the stretcher, the clear liquid dripping steadily into her arm. "Mommy!" Noah's voice was small, uncertain. The woman's head lolled toward them, her unfocused gaze struggling to lock onto anything. Lena overheard the paramedics murmuring about the lingering effects of the illicit substance in her system and the need to flush it out. "Noah," her voice was weak and slurred, but Lena caught the confusion and distress beneath it. Why are you still here? Where's Dale? I told you to go with him." Lena felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of the man's name. Officer Daniels stepped forward, his voice firm but professional. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to answer some questions about what happened here today." The woman's face contorted, a mix of confusion and anger breaking through her drug-induced haze. "Questions? What questions? I didn't do anything wrong." The officer's voice firm yet measured. "We believe you are involved in an attempt at child trafficking and kidnapping, ma'am. We found a sum of money on the table, and we need you to explain what's happening here." The woman's eyes flickered with defiance as she crossed her arms tightly over her chest. Her lips trembled, but she refused to say a word. The officer's question seemed to hang in the air, but she remained silent, her gaze cold and unwavering. Her silence was a statement in itself, one that seemed to speak volumes as she stubbornly stared straight ahead, not even acknowledging the officer's presence. No matter how much he pressed, she remained unmoved, her lips sealed as if she believed that withholding the truth would somehow shield her from the reality of the situation. As the paramedics prepared to load her into the ambulance, the screech of tires announced the arrival of another vehicle. A man leaped out, his eyes wild as they scanned the scene. The moment he spotted Noah, his face crumpled with relief. "Noah! Oh, thank God!" Noah's reaction was immediate. "Daddy!" he cried, squirming in Lena's arms. She set him down gently, watching as he ran towards his father. Michael Holloway dropped to his knees, enveloping his son in a fierce embrace. Tears streamed down his face as he held Noah close, murmuring words too soft for Lena to hear. The reunion was short-lived, however, as Noah's mother suddenly became more alert. Her eyes darted between Noah and Michael, a mix of anger and desperation in her gaze. "He's my son," she shouted, struggling against the restraints on the stretcher. "You can't take him from me. Noah, tell them you want to stay with Mommy." But before Noah said anything, a crackling voice came over the police radio. "Suspect apprehended," the dispatcher announced. "Vehicle with license plate TN783XYZ intercepted on Highway 40. Suspect identified as Dale Mercer." The officers exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and concern on their faces. One of them stepped away to take the call, his voice low as he spoke into his radio. Moments later he returned, his face grim. "Mercer confessed," he announced to his colleagues. "He claims he was here to buy the boy, says the mother agreed to sell him for $2,000. A collective gasp went up from those within earshot. Lena felt her knees go weak, and she tightened her hold on Noah, as if she could somehow shield him from this horrific truth. Michael's face contorted with rage as he took in the information. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice shaking with fury. "You tried to sell our son? For what, $2,000? When she didn't answer, Michael's control snapped. $2,000, he shouted at Krista's prone form on the stretcher. "That's all he's worth to you? Our son? You'd sell him just to feed your next high." Krista let out a strangled laugh. It was a chilling sound, devoid of humor, tinged with desperation and madness. Noah buried his face in his father's shoulder, his small body shaking with renewed sobs. Michael's face hardened as he glared at his ex-wife. "It's over, Krista," he said, his voice low and firm. "You've lost him for good this time." The laughter quickly gave way to furious outbursts as the paramedics prepared to move her to the ambulance, her words slurring but filled with venom. "You think you've won. He's nothing but trouble, that kid. Eats up all my money, never gives anything back. Next time I have kids, they'll work for me from the day they're out of my body." She let out another maniacal laugh that made Lena wince, her eyes wild with a twisted rage that sent a shiver down Lena's spine. Officer Daniels turned to Krista. "Mrs. Holloway, you'll be transported to the hospital for treatment, but you'll be under police supervision." Krista's laughter was cut short as the ambulance doors closed. Officer Daniels shook his head, disgust evident on his face. "Let's hope the judge and jury hear that little speech. It might just be enough to put her away for a long, long time." Michael held Noah tighter, shielding him from his mother's words. "Don't listen to her, buddy," he murmured. "She's evil and sick in the head. What she's saying isn't true." Noah looked up at his father, his eyes brimming with tears. "I don't want to see Mom again," he whispered. Lena, who had been watching the scene unfold, felt her heart break for the little boy. She crouched down beside him, her voice gentle. "Noah, sweetie, remember this. There will always be people who love you as you grow up. If you choose to be kind and good, there will always be people on your side." Michael looked at Lena, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're his guardian angel. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." As the police began to wrap up their on-scene investigation, Officer Daniels approached them once more. "We'll need you all to come down to the station," he said. "We'll need formal statements, and we'll have someone from Child Services there to assess the situation." Lena nodded, then suddenly remembered something. "Officer," she said, "Noah needs proper clothes. There should be some in the suitcase in the room if you could find it." The officer agreed, dispatching another officer to retrieve the suitcase. While they waited, Lena remembered the sandwich that was left abandoned in front of the room. She asked Barry to bring some food and drink for Noah, knowing that the boy hadn't eaten in hours. As Noah devoured the new grilled cheese sandwich Barry brought, Michael looked on, his face a mix of relief and anger. "He said he hasn't eaten since last night," Michael explained quietly to Lena. "Krista told him she didn't have any money for food." Lena nodded, a surge of anger at Krista's neglect rising within her. "I know. Earlier, Noah asked me for food and I brought it to him, but the mother had already taken him away." She pushed her frustration aside, focusing on Noah instead. "Here, sweetheart, she said, handing him another portion of sandwich. "You can eat this on the way to the station. It'll help keep you strong." The police returned with a fresh change of clothes, and Lena helped the boy change in one of the restrooms. When they stepped out, he looked better, clean, dressed in proper clothes, and no longer hungry after eating. As they prepared to leave, Lena watched Noah and Michael climb into a police car. The events of the morning had irrevocably altered everything, not just for Noah and his family, but for Lena as well. She had witnessed the darker side of life at the Starlight Motel before, but nothing had ever felt quite like this. As the police car drove away with the boy and his father inside, a wave of sadness and disbelief washed over Lena. Years of living in Orange Mound had hardened her, yet nothing could have prepared her for the horrors she'd witnessed today. It felt like the darkest moment she'd ever experienced, but it also forced her to face the deep uncertainty in her own life. She wondered about the future, about the possibility of having a child of her own, and whether she would ever find the right person to share that life with. But the thought of raising a child here, in this suffocating, hellish place, made her question everything. The day's events had shaken Lena to her core, confronting her with the darkest aspects of human nature. Yet they had also ignited something within her, a fierce determination to make a difference, no matter how small. As the chaos of the police investigation unfolded around her, Lena knew her life at the Starlight Motel would never be the same again. She turned back toward the motel, the weight of the day still heavy but tempered with a new sense of resolve. There was still work to be done, and the long day ahead loomed. But for the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose stirring within her. Today she had made a difference, and she was determined to continue doing so, one small act of kindness at a time.